A new girl at our school stole 3 boyfriends in 2 weeks, so the entire school turned against her, and someone put laxatives in her food. When I visited her in the psychiatric hospital, she told me she was going to destroy some things herself very soon. There was this girl, Juliana, who transferred to our school right after winter break. Within exactly 2 weeks, she'd somehow stolen 3 different boyfriends from the most popular girls in school. At least that's the story that spread like wildfire. My best friend literally grabbed my arm in the hallway after the 3rd breakup. I'm serious. Stay away from that girl. She completely destroyed Lily's 2-year relationship, and now Thomas won't even look at Lily anymore. Even teachers seemed uncomfortable around Juliana. So obvious whenever students tried sitting near her in class, they'd suddenly announce new seating arrangements, find reasons to shuffle people around. She ate lunch completely alone every day, at this corner table, while the entire cafeteria buzzed with whispers. Boys wouldn't even make eye contact with her, and I swear some girls actually hissed under their breath, like watching someone navigate a minefield. But something felt off, and I was curious. I tried sitting near her once in chemistry before our teacher suddenly decided we needed better lab partnerships and moved me. Honestly, she just seemed completely normal, maybe even nicer than most people. I started paying attention over the next few weeks, and watching her life at school become absolute hell was honestly traumatizing. Girls organized full boycotts of any group project with her name on it. Someone carved homewrecker into her locker. But the thing that made me physically sick, someone put laxatives in her lunch, and she got violently ill in the main hallway while people literally laughed and pulled out their phones to record her. But here's what really messed with my head. Juliana never once fought back or defended herself. She tutored struggling freshmen for free during study hall. Volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend, I know because my cousin works there. When people spread the most vicious lies about her, she just absorbed it all. For someone supposedly manipulative enough to destroy relationships, she was weirdly generous and selfless. It didn't add up. Then came the party that changed everything. Rebecca's house, her parents were out of town. Basically, the whole junior class showed up. I was in the upstairs bathroom when I heard a commotion in the hallway. Dylan had cornered a sophomore girl, Jen, against the wall. She looked terrified, kept saying please stop while he kept pushing closer, clearly hammered and getting aggressive. Everyone else just walked past like nothing was happening. Some people were even filming and laughing like it was entertainment, obviously in distress, and nobody cared. That's when Juliana appeared out of nowhere and shoved herself between them. When Dylan got hostile, threatened to ruin both their nights, she pulled out her phone and started recording. Go ahead, keep talking. I'm sure your scholarship committee would love to see this side of their star athlete. Dylan actually backed down. Juliana made sure Jen got safely to her friends, then disappeared back into the crowd like nothing happened. I saw the whole thing, most fearless thing I'd ever witnessed. You'd think that would change how people saw her, right? Think again. By Monday, the story had completely flipped. Dylan was telling everyone Juliana had been stalking him all night, trying to start drama. People said she was desperate for attention, probably staged the whole thing with Jen. Worst part, Jen, who Juliana had literally saved, went along with it. Claimed nothing serious was happening, that Juliana had misunderstood. The peer pressure was so intense, Jen threw her own protector under the bus just to avoid becoming the next target. Juliana got suspended pending a full investigation. But the real breaking point was when someone hacked her social media and leaked her private messages with her therapist from a mental health app. Screenshots of her discussing trauma, family issues, self-harm thoughts spread through every group chat and platform. People shared her most vulnerable moments like memes. Kids taped printouts of her therapy messages to her locker. Parents got anonymous emails with her private mental health information, warning them she was dangerous and unstable. Worst part, everyone felt justified. They genuinely believed they were protecting the school from her. I tried texting Juliana, but my messages wouldn't deliver. Then I heard she was in the hospital. I found her in the psychiatric facility looking so small and broken. That's when she showed me the restraining order Dylan had filed against her, meaning she couldn't come back to school. She broke down, admitted she'd never actually dated anyone since arriving. She'd just befriended a few of the guys, given them relationship advice. They'd decided they didn't want to be with their girlfriends anymore, but instead of telling them why, they just said they'd fallen for Juliana, then staged the breakup. Jen went along with it because they'd asked. Juliana said she never realized it would lead to her own destruction. Told me not to worry, though she was going to destroy some things herself, very soon. I left the psychiatric facility with my hands shaking. The way Juliana had smiled when she mentioned destroying things made my stomach turn. Outside, I fumbled with my phone and noticed 7 missed calls from Jen. I hesitated over her name before finally calling back. She answered on the first ring, voice cracking with panic, rambling about needing to talk immediately, something about Dylan deleting everything from his social media. I told her I'd meet her at the coffee shop near school in 20 minutes. The drive gave me time to process what I just witnessed. Juliana's shift from broken victim to someone plotting revenge had happened so fast. Her eyes had gone cold the moment she mentioned destroying things. The girl who'd saved Jen at the party seemed completely gone. I found Jen hunched over a corner table, laptop open, phone in hand, dark circles under her eyes. She grabbed my wrist the second I sat down, pulled me toward the screen. Dylan's Instagram showed nothing but a default profile picture. His Twitter, Facebook, even LinkedIn, all wiped clean. Jen pulled up cached versions of his pages, showed me how systematic the deletion was. Every photo, every post, every comment from the past 3 years, gone overnight. Even tagged photos on other people's profiles had somehow vanished. I asked why she cared so much about Dylan's social media purge. Her face crumpled. She admitted she'd been lying about more than just the party incident. Hands trembling, she opened a hidden folder on her laptop, screenshots of text messages between Juliana and Jen's ex-boyfriend, from months before any of the breakups happened. My blood ran cold reading them. Juliana had been asking detailed questions about Jen's relationship, her insecurities, past arguments dated back to before Juliana even transferred to our school. Jen explained she'd found them accidentally, borrowing her ex's phone weeks ago, but had been too scared to tell anyone. The shame in her voice was crushing. She'd thrown Juliana under the bus at the party to protect herself from becoming the next target, already knowing Juliana had orchestrated her own breakup. My phone buzzed a text from my cousin at the animal shelter, mentioning something odd about Juliana's volunteer orientation months back. Apparently, she'd spent more time asking about the other volunteers than learning about animal care, taking detailed notes about everyone's families, jobs, financial situations. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see. I asked Jen to forward me the screenshots. She hesitated. Reading them meant accepting the girl I'd defended. The girl I believed was an innocent victim, had been playing everyone from the start. Jen's laptop dinged a new message. Dylan wanted to meet both of us urgently. Said he had proof of something bigger than we realized. Against my better judgment, we agreed to meet him at the abandoned warehouse where kids sometimes went to skateboard. Dylan looked terrible when we arrived, his usual confidence gone, replaced with paranoia, checking over his shoulder while explaining why he'd deleted everything. Juliana had apparently been collecting information on everyone for months, and he'd just discovered she had recordings of private conversations. He played an audio file, his own voice, talking to a friend about Jen, discussing intimate details about their relationship, things only he should have known, too clear to be accidental. Juliana had deliberately recorded him. Dylan revealed 2 other ex-boyfriends had contacted him with similar discoveries. Juliana had recordings of all of them, had used the information to manipulate them into breaking up with their girlfriends, threatened to release the recordings if they ever told the truth. The manipulation ran deeper than anyone imagined. Dylan showed messages where Juliana had systematically shared each girlfriend's deepest insecurities with their boyfriends, poisoning the relationships from within, framing it as friendly advice, helping them understand their girlfriends better. I thought about all the times I'd seen Juliana tutoring students, helping at the shelter. Had every kind act been calculated? Had she been gathering information the entire time? My cousin's text seemed to confirm it. Juliana's kindness had been a weapon. Rebecca appeared at the warehouse entrance, surprising all of us she'd been following Dylan, worried about his erratic behavior. When she heard what we were discussing, her face went pale. She admitted Juliana had tried counseling her weeks earlier about her boyfriend's supposed cheating. The details Juliana had known were too specific, too private, things Rebecca had only discussed with her boyfriend in their own apartment. Rebecca realized now Juliana must have been monitoring their conversations somehow, though she couldn't figure out how. We spent the next hour comparing notes, and the pattern became undeniable. Juliana had targeted specific people, gathered intelligence through calculated friendliness, then used it to destroy relationships. The boyfriends were just tools. She'd manipulated them into ending things to make herself look like the victim. But why? What was the point of destroying random relationships? Dylan mentioned something that made my blood freeze. He'd overheard Juliana on the phone at the party, speaking in code about family debts and old grudges, mentioning our town specifically, something about payback being overdue. I remembered Juliana's threat at the psychiatric facility about destroying things. This wasn't random at all. She'd come here with a plan, and we'd all been too focused on the wrong story to see it. The popular girls weren't her targets. They were collateral damage. Jen's phone rang, making us all jump, her little sister, crying, saying someone had been calling the house threatening Jen. The caller said Jen needed to maintain her story about the party, or things would get much worse for their family. We decided to head to my house to figure out our next move. My parents were at work, giving us privacy. I made coffee while the others spread everything out on the dining room table. The screenshots, the recordings, the timeline laid out together. The scope of Juliana's manipulation was staggering. She'd spent months preparing, researching, positioning herself. The transfer to our school hadn't been random at all. Dylan pulled up his cached Facebook data and found something disturbing. Juliana had been viewing profiles of students from our school for 6 months before she transferred, studying our social dynamics, identifying key relationships, mapping the connections between families. I called my cousin to ask more about Juliana's volunteer work. She checked the shelter records and found Juliana had specifically requested shifts overlapping with certain volunteers, all of whom had parents working at local banks or businesses. The realization hit hard. This wasn't teenage drama or boyfriend stealing. Juliana had been gathering intelligence on our families, our parents' work, our finances. The relationship destruction was just cover for something bigger. Rebecca remembered something else during one of their conversations. Juliana had asked detailed questions about her father's business, about their family's connections in town. Framed as friendly interest at the time, it now seemed calculating and purposeful. We tried contacting Juliana's previous school. The administration wouldn't share information about former students. Dylan had better luck through social media, connecting with a student journalist who'd covered Juliana's sudden departure. The journalist's story made our situation even clearer. Juliana had left her previous school after rumors surfaced about her exploiting a classmate's mental health crisis for attention, positioning herself as a supportive friend, gaining access to private information, then using it to manipulate multiple people. Identical pattern. Destroyed relationships, gathered intelligence, positioned herself as a victim when exposed. The journalist mentioned Juliana's family had had business disputes in that town too, though details were vague. My parents came home early, surprised to find the group in our dining room. When I started explaining what we'd discovered, my mother's face went white. She exchanged a look with my father that made my stomach drop. They revealed our family had history with Juliana's old business tensions from years ago. My father's company had won a contract Juliana's father had desperately wanted, and the loss had caused significant financial problems for their family. The room went silent as we processed it. I hadn't been targeted randomly. Juliana had researched me, befriended me, made me her defender. Every interaction had been calculated to position me as her ally. My mother made calls to other parents while we kept piecing the picture together. Several families had similar stories, old business rivalries, competed contracts, professional conflicts with Juliana's family, too consistent to be coincidence. Dylan's phone buzzed with messages from the other ex-boyfriends ready to come forward with their evidence, tired of being blackmailed into silence. The recordings Juliana had threatened them with had been illegally obtained. She had no real power over them anymore. We agreed to meet again the next day to coordinate our response. As everyone left, I felt the weight of what we'd uncovered. Juliana wasn't a victim or a villain in some teenage drama. She was something far more dangerous, a calculating manipulator using our trust to gather intelligence for her family's vendetta. That night, I lay awake going through every interaction with her, every kind gesture, every moment of vulnerability, every time she'd seemed like a victim, all performance. The girl in the psychiatric facility promising to destroy things hadn't been making empty threats. She was declaring war. The next morning, Juliana was back from the psychiatric facility. I saw her walking through the parking lot, head held high, that same unsettling smile playing at her lips. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with concerned messages from friends. Apparently, Juliana had been sharing private conversations I'd had with her during our friendship, things I'd told her in confidence about my anxiety, my parents' financial stress, even embarrassing childhood stories I'd never told anyone else, twisted just enough to make me look unstable and attention-seeking. The messages spread through group chats faster than I could respond. Friends started pulling away, giving me strange looks in the hallway. I realized with a sick feeling she was using the exact same tactics on me she'd used on the boyfriends, isolating me, making me look untrustworthy, turning my own vulnerabilities into weapons. This wasn't random retaliation. She was systematically dismantling my credibility before I could expose her. Every move calculated, every shared secret strategically deployed. Felt like prey being circled by a predator who knew exactly where to strike. Meanwhile, Jen had decided she couldn't stay silent anymore, wrestling with her conscience all night, wanting to come forward with the truth about the party. But Juliana had somehow anticipated it. Before Jen could say anything publicly, her most embarrassing secrets started appearing online: private photos she'd sent her ex, screenshots of her venting about her parents' divorce, even her therapy appointment records. The preemptive strike was devastating. Jen's reputation crumbled overnight. Nobody would listen to her now about what really happened at the party. Neutralized as a witness before she could even speak. The precision of it was terrifying. Dylan reached out that afternoon, his paranoia now seeming completely justified. He'd been digging deeper into Juliana's past, discovered her family had been forced to leave their previous town after similar business disputes, a pattern of conflicts that always ended with the other families suffering mysterious setbacks, failed businesses, leaked private information, destroyed reputations. We started documenting everything meticulously, every text, every interaction, every piece of evidence preserved. I learned to screenshot conversations immediately, knowing Juliana had ways of making digital evidence disappear. Exhausting, but necessary. The police had reviewed the party incident, but conflicting witness statements and timeline inconsistencies created a legal stalemate. Juliana's version was just plausible enough, her counter-evidence just convincing enough. Without concrete proof, authorities couldn't act on our suspicions about her larger schemes. I spent hours online, carefully reaching out to students from Juliana's previous schools. Slowly, a network of victims emerged, each with similar stories. Initial friendship, gathered intelligence, systematic destruction once they discovered her true nature. We created a private group to share information and support each other. Through it, I learned Juliana's volunteer work had darker purposes. She'd used her position at various charities to gather information on struggling families, financial problems, health issues, family conflicts, all cataloged and stored for potential use. Her kindness had been reconnaissance. Dylan's ex-girlfriend, someone I'd barely spoken to before, approached me with crucial information. Juliana had contacted her months before transferring to our school, posing as a concerned friend from social media, spending weeks extracting information about relationship problems while presenting herself as a sympathetic ear. Former enemies were becoming allies as we recognized our shared threat. The popular girls who'd initially blamed Juliana for stealing their boyfriends now understood they'd been casualties in a larger war. We formed an unlikely coalition, united by our need to protect ourselves and expose the truth. Juliana's return to school created new urgency. She moved through the hallways with confidence, her victim status seemingly enhanced by the psychiatric stay. Teachers treated her with extra care. Students gave her space out of guilt or fear. She'd turned her hospitalization into another weapon. During one of my visits, I'd noticed something chilling. She'd been reading books on manipulation psychology, taking detailed notes on victim behavior patterns. Her stay hadn't been about healing. It had been about studying, preparing, learning new tactics. The facility had been her training ground. As pressure mounted around her family's activities, Juliana's moves grew increasingly desperate, and risky threats sent from traceable numbers, digital footprints left in her haste to control the narrative. The cracks in her perfect manipulation were starting to show. She made a calculated offer to forgive everyone and move forward if we'd all publicly acknowledge we'd wronged her. The trap was obvious: public vindication that would discredit any future accusations. Our alliance recognized it immediately, refused to take the bait. Our core group began meeting regularly, sharing information, coordinating our response. But Juliana seemed to know about every meeting, every plan, systematically attacking whoever seemed most vulnerable, targeting their families, relationships, deepest insecurities, a war on multiple fronts. A pattern chilled me. Juliana hadn't randomly targeted popular kids or relationship drama. Every person she'd focused on had parents working in banking, local business, or positions with access to financial information. This wasn't teenage vendettas. It was intelligence gathering for something much bigger. Her influence extended far beyond our school. Through her family's network, they'd compromised multiple businesses, intimidated numerous families. What looked like teenage drama was actually a sophisticated operation, using a teenager as cover. The scope was staggering. The investigation revealed my father's company was among several. Juliana's family had specifically targeted old business disputes festered into something darker. A systematic campaign to gather intelligence and destroy competitors. I wasn't just a random friend to Juliana. I was a strategic asset. Jen found her courage despite the public humiliation, decided staying silent only enabled more victims. She began sharing her truth with anyone who'd listen, knowing each person who heard it was one less person Juliana could manipulate. Her bravery inspired others to speak up. The bonds between our former enemies strengthened as we realized we weren't just fighting for ourselves, but for our community's integrity. Popular kids, outcasts, athletes, theater kids, all united by recognizing Juliana's family posed a threat to everyone. I made a conscious choice to maintain ethical boundaries. It would have been easy to use Juliana's own tactics against her: spread lies, manipulate information, destroy her credibility through underhanded means. I refused. We'd fight with truth, not manipulation. A direct confrontation with Juliana revealed the depth of her delusion. She genuinely believed her family had been persecuted, that their actions were justified revenge for imagined slights. Her moral framework was so distorted she saw herself as the hero of her own story, everyone else as deserving targets. Parents of affected families pooled resources to hire a private investigator. Through legitimate channels, they uncovered financial irregularities in multiple businesses. Juliana's family had targeted circumstantial but compelling patterns of insider information used for profit. Juliana's support network began fracturing as community members realized they'd been manipulated. People who defended her started seeing the patterns, understanding how they'd been used to enable her targeting. The tide was turning. Victims from multiple schools coordinated to expose the pattern. What had seemed like isolated incidents were revealed as part of a larger strategy, spanning years and multiple communities. Resources mobilized as affected families shared knowledge and evidence, lawyers comparing notes, investigators sharing findings, victims supporting each other. The individual threads were weaving into a net that would eventually trap Juliana's family. I overheard a phone conversation between Juliana's parents while visiting a friend who lived near them, discussing keeping a low profile until the statute of limitations expired on some previous misunderstanding. Casual way they discussed evading consequences was chilling. My credibility in the community was restored as people began understanding the true scope of what I'd been trying to expose. I wasn't a troublemaker or drama seeker. I'd been trying to protect everyone from a sophisticated targeting operation. The vindication came with a sobering understanding of how much damage had already been done. Juliana's options narrowed as her family faced coordinated resistance. The businesses they'd targeted were now aware and taking precautions. The families they'd tried to exploit were sharing information. Their operation was being exposed to sunlight. A prior victim from a different school shared the most damning revelation yet, evidence that Juliana's family had been using their teenage daughter as an intelligence gatherer for years. Juliana wasn't just aware of her family's schemes. She was an active, willing participant, trained since childhood. I focused on protecting potential future victims by sharing what we'd learned with other families, building information networks, warning systems, ways to identify and resist manipulation tactics. Not about revenge, about prevention. Law enforcement from multiple jurisdictions began taking notice. What had started as teenage drama complaints revealed patterns of fraud, extortion, and identity theft across multiple communities. The investigation expanded beyond our local police. Juliana's manipulation attempts began failing as the community developed immunity to her tactics. People recognized her patterns, saw through her performances. The psychological weapons she'd relied on becoming ineffective against an informed, united community. The last holdout in our school, a naive freshman who still believed Juliana was a victim, finally saw the truth. When Juliana tried to recruit her, asked the girl to gather information about her parents' business dealings, promising friendship in exchange for intelligence. The girl reported it immediately. My reputation transformed from troublemaker to protector as people understood what I'd been fighting against. The recognition was bittersweet. It came with the knowledge of how many people had been hurt while others remained blind to the threat. The private investigators' findings were filed with proper authorities, banking irregularities, patterns of insider trading, suspicious financial transactions, all pointing to a sophisticated operation using gathered intelligence for profit. Too consistent to be coincidence. Pressure from the investigation forced Juliana's family into increasingly desperate moves, threats, attempts to intimidate witnesses. Their psychological warfare was escalating towards something more dangerous. The mask of civility was slipping. Juliana's true nature was fully revealed when she attempted to frame me for harassment, fake messages, staged incidents, trying to build a case that I was the real aggressor. But our documentation and witness network made her fabrications transparent. The personal stakes crystallized as I realized this wasn't just about me or my friends anymore. We were protecting our entire community from a family that had turned exploitation into an art form. Every person who stood up to them protected countless future victims. I demonstrated my growth by building legitimate support systems, instead of engaging in the psychological warfare. Juliana expected survivor networks, documentation systems, communication channels that couldn't be compromised. We fought with organization, not manipulation. Key community members began rejecting Juliana's narrative as they understood the context. Business owners, school officials, parent groups, all starting to see past her victim performance to the predator beneath. The community consciousness was shifting. Multiple victim communities coordinated their testimony with law enforcement. What had been dismissed as teenage drama and isolated incidents became undeniable as a years-long multi-community pattern. Investigators from different jurisdictions began sharing information, building a comprehensive case. Initial victories came as Juliana's family faced their first criminal charges: financial fraud, identity theft, extortion, reflecting the true scope of their crimes. The system that had failed individual victims was finally responding to collective evidence. Juliana's final manipulation attempt before the investigation closed in was her most desperate. She threatened vague but serious harm to the community if her family faced prosecution. The threats were recorded, documented, immediately reported to law enforcement. Taken seriously, officials coordinated with school leadership and community leaders to assess and address the danger. Juliana's family had revealed themselves as not just psychological predators, but potential physical threats when cornered. The middle of our story was ending, but the final confrontation loomed ahead. We'd exposed the truth, built our defenses, united our community. Now came the hardest part, seeing justice through to the end while protecting ourselves from a family with nothing left to lose. The courthouse steps felt cold under my feet as I arrived early that morning. Federal investigators had finally coordinated with local authorities after months of evidence gathering. I watched Juliana's family arrive in separate vehicles, lawyers flanking them like shields. The confident manipulation I'd witnessed for so long had been replaced by something harder, more desperate. Inside, I took my seat among dozens of other witnesses, former classmates, business owners, parents, all united by the systematic targeting we'd endured. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically: bank records showing suspicious transfers, communication logs revealing coordinated information gathering, financial documents exposing years of fraud totaling over $40,000 across multiple victims. Juliana sat between her parents, her appearance carefully crafted to project innocence, but I noticed the calculating way she scanned the room, cataloging who was present, who might still be manipulated, fingers tapping the table in what I recognized as her planning rhythm. The first day of testimony revealed the full scope of their operation. Witnesses from 3 different schools described identical patterns: teenagers befriended, families researched, businesses targeted. The prosecutor showed how Juliana's volunteer work had been cover for gathering financial information on vulnerable families. My turn came on the second day. I described finding the psychological profiles in Juliana's room, the systematic way she'd analyzed our pressure points, how she'd used our friendship to access my father's business information. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a jealous friend, but our documented evidence spoke louder than their narrative. Dylan testified about the recordings, playing excerpts that showed Juliana's calculated manipulation. The courtroom grew silent, hearing her calmly discussing how to break each relationship, how to position herself as the victim. The girl who'd claimed innocence had left too much evidence of her guilt. Jen's testimony was particularly powerful. She brought copies of the threatening messages, evidence of the systematic harassment she'd endured for even considering telling the truth, described how Juliana had gathered information about her family's financial struggles and used it to ensure her silence. The investigation had uncovered something even more disturbing. Juliana hadn't just learned these tactics from her parents. She'd been actively involved since age 14. Training documents showed how they taught her to identify targets, gather intelligence, manipulate social dynamics. She wasn't a victim of her family's crimes. She was a willing participant. Rebecca's father testified about the business intelligence Juliana had tried to extract. He'd found evidence that his company's private bid information had leaked to competitors, traced back to conversations his daughter had innocently shared with Juliana. The financial damage was substantial but focused, designed to hurt without triggering major investigations. The defense tried arguing Juliana had been manipulated by her criminal parents, but evidence contradicted it. Text messages showed her suggesting new targets, proposing manipulation strategies, even correcting her parents' approaches. An eager student who'd surpassed her teachers. During a recess, I overheard Juliana's mother making phone calls, speaking in the same coded language I'd heard before. Security intervened quickly, discovering she was trying to coordinate witness intimidation from inside the courthouse. The desperation was palpable. The private investigator presented financial forensics showing how the family had used gathered intelligence insider trading based on overheard conversations, business deals undermined using private information, small enough to avoid major scrutiny, but systematic enough to fund their lifestyle. Multiple victims described the same escalation: first friendship, then information gathering, then subtle manipulation. When discovered, they'd face systematic destruction of credibility. The playbook was consistent across years and locations. Juliana's psychiatric records, subpoenaed for the trial, revealed something chilling even during her hospitalization. She'd been gathering information on other patients, documenting their vulnerabilities. Her therapist testified she'd shown no genuine remorse, only frustration at being caught. The school counselor who'd revealed Juliana's deliberate transfer request provided crucial testimony. Documents showed Juliana had researched our school's social dynamics for months, identified key targets, even created preliminary psychological profiles before arriving. The transfer wasn't random. It was a planned operation. Evidence from Juliana's previous schools painted an even darker picture at each location. Damaged families, failed businesses, destroyed relationships left behind, always moving before consequences caught up, always positioning herself as the victim of jealous peers. The moment that changed everything came when prosecutors presented Juliana's own writings journals detailing her manipulation strategies, rating her success at destroying relationships, planning future targets. Her own words demolished any defense of innocence or manipulation by her parents. I watched her face as her journal entries were read aloud. For the first time, the mask completely slipped. The cold calculation in her eyes was visible to everyone. She'd documented her crimes in detail, confident she'd never be caught. The defense's case crumbled as witness after witness confirmed the patterns former friends Juliana had recruited and discarded. Business owners whose companies had suffered mysterious setbacks, families whose private struggles had been exploited for profit. Closing arguments brought everything into focus. The prosecutor outlined how a family had turned their teenage daughter into a weapon, using her to gather intelligence for financial crimes. But evidence showed Juliana hadn't been a tool. She'd been an enthusiastic partner who'd refined their methods. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours, guilty on multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and extortion for all 3 family members. Juliana's age meant juvenile penalties, but her parents were looking at serious prison time. During sentencing, victims gave impact statements. Business owners described financial struggles. Parents detailed the toll on their families. Students shared how the psychological manipulation had affected their ability to trust. The human cost of their crimes became undeniable. Juliana's statement to the court was revealing. She expressed regret only for being caught, framing herself as a victim of circumstance. Even facing justice, she couldn't abandon the manipulation tactics that had defined her life. The judge saw through it immediately. Her parents received 8 to 10 years each, with requirements for financial restitution to victims. Assets gained through fraud were seized. The network they'd spent years building was systematically dismantled by authorities. Juliana's sentence reflected both her age and her active participation: 2 years in a juvenile facility with mandatory psychological treatment, 5 years of probation afterward, restrictions on internet access and financial activities. The judge emphasized this was about rehabilitation, not just punishment. The community response was mixed. Some felt justice had been served. Others worried about what would happen when Juliana was released. Support groups formed for victims, sharing resources for healing and protecting against future manipulation. I learned Juliana's facility specialized in treating personality disorders and criminal behavior. Reports suggested she was a challenging patient, still attempting to manipulate staff and other residents. Change, if it came at all, would be slow. The financial restitution process began immediately. Families who'd lost money through the targeting scheme started receiving compensation from seized assets. It didn't erase the damage, but provided some measure of justice. Our school implemented new policies about information sharing and student privacy. Counselors received training on identifying manipulation tactics. What we'd learned through pain became protective knowledge for future students. Dylan moved forward by focusing on advocacy, speaking at other schools about recognizing manipulation, sharing his story to help others avoid similar targeting. His athletic scholarship had survived the scandal, giving him a platform to create change. Jen found strength in her truth being validated, pursued journalism, inspired by the student reporters who'd helped expose Juliana's pattern. Her experience with information warfare had taught her the power of documented truth. Rebecca's family strengthened their business security protocols, hired cybersecurity experts, implemented strict information controls. The vulnerability Juliana had exploited became a catalyst for protecting other families. The investigation's ripple effects continued for months. Other communities where Juliana's family had operated came forward with similar stories. A task force formed to address the intersection of teenage social manipulation and financial crimes. I returned to normal life slowly. Trust came harder now. Friendships required more verification, but the experience had also shown me the power of community unity against predators. We'd stopped a sophisticated operation through collective action. Updates from the juvenile facility indicated Juliana was participating in therapy. Though her progress remained questionable, her therapist noted she was highly intelligent and skilled at appearing compliant while maintaining her core behaviors. The Financial Crimes Unit published a report on the case. Identifying it as a new pattern in family-based fraud operations using teenagers for intelligence gathering was rare but effective. Our case became a training example for investigators. 6 months after sentencing, I received a letter from Juliana. Even from detention, she attempted manipulation, apologizing while subtly threatening to reveal misunderstandings about my family. I forwarded it to authorities immediately. Old patterns died hard. Her parents' appeal was denied evidence too comprehensive, patterns too clear. They'd built their own cage through meticulous documentation of their crimes. The very thoroughness that had made them dangerous became their downfall. Community healing took various forms. Some families moved away, seeking fresh starts. Others became advocates for fraud prevention. The shared trauma had created unexpected bonds between former strangers. The animal shelter where Juliana had volunteered implemented new screening procedures, background checks, reference verification, limited access to personal information. Her infiltration had taught valuable lessons about institutional vulnerability. A year later, the full impact was clearer. 43 families across 3 states had been affected. Combined financial damages exceeded $200,000. The psychological damage was harder to quantify, but equally real. I chose to study psychology in college, driven by the need to understand how someone could become so calculating. The questions haunted me: was Juliana born manipulative, or had her family created a monster? The answers remained elusive. Updates on her progress were limited, but suggested minimal change, a model prisoner superficially, while maintaining her core traits. Rehabilitation seemed unlikely without genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing, which she still refused. The community had grown stronger through shared adversity. Information networks stayed active, watching for similar threats. We'd learned predators could hide behind any face, use any relationship as a weapon. My final visit to the courthouse came during a restitution hearing. Watching Juliana via video link from detention, I saw the same calculating eyes, the same practiced expressions. But now everyone else saw them too. The mask had been permanently removed. Moving forward meant accepting that some people choose darkness. Juliana's family had turned crime into a generational practice, corrupting their daughter from childhood. Breaking that cycle would require more than just imprisonment. I found peace knowing we'd protected future victims, every family warned, every business secured, every student educated about manipulation tactics meant fewer opportunities for predators. Our pain had become preventive power. The story spread through legitimate channels: law enforcement training, fraud prevention seminars, school safety programs. Not sensational gossip, but educational truth. Knowledge was the best defense against manipulation. 5 years seemed both long and short for Juliana's potential return to society. Would genuine change occur, or would she simply become more sophisticated? The community remained vigilant, prepared either way. My transformation from naive defender to informed protector was complete. I'd learned to balance compassion with caution, to verify before trusting. The girl who desperately wanted to believe in Juliana's innocence had grown into someone who could recognize and resist manipulation. Looking back, the signs had been there from the beginning. The too perfect victim story, the calculated kindness, the strategic targeting. We'd been too focused on the surface drama to see the deeper game being played. Our class graduated with hard-won wisdom about trust and verification. We'd survived a sophisticated predator and emerged stronger. The bonds formed in opposition to Juliana's manipulation proved more durable than any she'd tried to destroy. The case file closed with conviction secured and restitution ongoing, but its lessons lived on in every family that learned to protect their information, every student who recognized manipulation tactics, every community that understood the importance of collective vigilance. Justice had been served through the system, not through revenge or retaliation. We'd fought Juliana's darkness with truth and unity, proving that manipulation ultimately fails against coordinated resistance. The girl who'd promised to destroy things had only destroyed herself. What started as such a dark story ended with real light and healing.